Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm here with another topic of legal reasoning, a concept that really matters is no fault liability. No fault liability. In short, it's called NFL. जिसका मतलब ये होता है that when a person can be held liable to pay compensation or to face legal consequences even when he may not have done anything wrong. Yes, it sounds surprising or maybe weird, but that's true. A person may be held liable under law even when he has done nothing wrong. Nothing wrong. He might have taken best possible care. He might have taken enough reasonable care and caution. He was not at fault at all, but still something happens, and because of which he is liable, he is answerable. That concept is called no fault liability, जिसमें दो कॉन्सेप्ट आते हैं, स्ट्रिक्ट लाइबिलिटी एंड एब्सोल्यूट लाइबिलिटी. दोनों में डिफरेंस क्या होता है वो हम समझेंगे थोड़ी देर में, बट लेट्स फर्स्ट अंडरस्टैंड कि दोनों के अंदर जो कॉमन चीज है वो क्या है. कॉमन एलिमेंट ये होता है that if you have brought something dangerous on your property, it can be a dog, it can be a factory, anything dangerous that you have on your property. Now you may have taken best possible care to avoid any kind of harm from that thing, but still someday sometime it escapes your property, it escapes your premises, causes damage outside to the people. Now when the case is filed against you, you cannot avoid your liability by saying that, sir, I have done nothing wrong. Sir, I have done nothing wrong. You cannot avoid your liability by simply saying that I have taken best possible care. I could not have done anything wrong. इसमें मेरी कोई गलती नहीं है. All these arguments will have no place because the entire concept says that you are liable even without any fault. That's the whole concept. No fault liability. Okay. So like in strict liability, we have dangerous thing on the property. It's a non-natural use. इसका मतलब होता है non-essential use of the property. ठीक है. और and then escape of the property. Escape का मतलब होता है, like I said, this is your property. ठीक है. अगर कोई चीज इससे बाहर चली जाती है, going out or going beyond your property, that's called escape, going beyond. Okay. And ultimately it causes damage to somebody, then it's a case of no fault liability, particularly strict liability. Before we understand the difference between strict liability and absolute liability, we need to understand the similarity these concepts share. And I told you what is the similarity. Dangerous thing, escaping your property, causing damage. Okay. Now the good part is that in strict liability there are still certain defenses, but these are very very limited defenses. ठीक है. very very limited defenses. बचने का बहुत जो तरीका है वो बहुत कम है. If you can say that there was some act of God, if you can say that the plaintiff himself did the wrong, if you can say that there was some third party involved in this act, ऐसा अगर कुछ आप बोलते हो तो आप बच सकते हो. There is a probability that you will be saved, but again the grounds of defenses are very very restricted. Okay. But interestingly, in absolute liability there is no defense. Absolute liability is a greater version, is a greater kind of liability, or I would say it is a stricter liability than strict liability. It is easier to call it stricter than strict. Stricter than strict. ठीक है. मतलब इसमें तो कोई डिफेंस ही नहीं है. सिमिलैरिटी क्या थी? डेंजरस थिंग, बियॉन्ड द प्रॉपर्टी एंड डैमेज. दैट्स द सिमिलैरिटी. डिफरेंस क्या है कि यहां पे कोई डिफेंस नहीं है और उसमें डिफेंस था. बट इन रियलिटी व्हाट हैपेंस, लेट मी टेल यू प्रैक्टिकली व्हाट हैपेंस. एब्सोल्यूट लायबिलिटी का जो कॉन्सेप्ट है दैट इज अप्लाइड इन केसेस ऑफ कमर्शियल सेटअप्स. जहां पे कोई फैक्ट्री होती है, देयर में बी अ फैक्ट्री और एन इंडस्ट्री, लार्ज स्केल. ठीक है. ऐसा कुछ है, कमर्शियल सेटअप है, प्रॉफिट मेकिंग सेटअप है, तो वहां पे द एब्सोल्यूट लायबिलिटी का यूज होता है. लेकिन स्ट्रिक्ट लायबिलिटी का यूज कहाँ होता है? जनरली नॉन कमर्शियल एंटिटीज के अंदर होता है, जनरली नॉन कमर्शियल सेटअप के अंदर होता है। एक एग्जांपल के थ्रू दोनों चीजों को समझेंगे। लेट्स से आई हैव अ फेरोशियस डॉग एट माय प्रॉपर्टी। Okay, now keeping a ferocious dog is definitely a dangerous thing. ठीक है, the dog is on my property for self defense. Now मैंने उसको हर तरीके से बांध के रखा है. I have taken best possible care that he doesn't escape the property, doesn't cause damage to others outside. I have taken best possible care. जो भी बेस्ट हो सकता था वो मैंने किया है. Still someday, if it manages to escape my property and cause damage outside, if it goes out of my control and causing damage to people outside, I am still liable under the law because it's a no fault liability. मैं ये नहीं बोल सकता that it was not my fault, क्योंकि ये बोलना तो अलाउड ही नहीं है. मेरी गलती नहीं है ये बोलना अलाउड नहीं है. That's why I am liable in strict liability, and particularly this is a non commercial setup, क्योंकि मैं I'm talking about my residence, I'm talking about my home, right? So home being a non commercial setup, strict liability shall be applicable practically. But what if this was a factory? What if this was a factory? Okay. uh, and then this had happened, then absolute liability would come into picture because of the nature of the activity. So the differentiating factor is the nature of the activity. If it is profit making commercial setup, absolute liability shall come into picture. Otherwise, strict liability will be there. Okay, now that you understood this concept, let's solve a few questions. Now clearly यहाँ पर क्या हो रहा है कि प्रोजेक्शन ऑफ ब्रांचेस ऑफ हिज ट्रीज ऑन बीज लैंड, तो ये एस्केप हो रहा है. दिस इज एज प्रॉपर्टी, दिस इज बीज प्रॉपर्टी. ए की प्रॉपर्टी पे जो ट्री है उसकी ब्रांचेस बी की प्रॉपर्टी पे जा रही हैं, तो यही कहलाएगा एस्केप. मैंने बोला था एस्केप का मतलब क्या होता है, गोइंग बियॉन्ड, आपकी एक सर्टेन लिमिट से बाहर चले जाना इज कॉल्ड एस्केप. ठीक है, तो एस्केप यहाँ पे हो रहा है. एंड बिकॉज ऑफ एस्केप बीज कैटल डाई, मतलब डैमेज हो रहा है, डैमेज हो रहा है. अब यहाँ पे देखो ये आर्गुमेंट नहीं चलेगा कि बी का जो कैटल है उसी की गलती है, वो क्यों, व्हाई डिड द कैटल ईट दैट, डजंट मैटर, वी आर नॉट गोइंग दैट वे. द प्रिंसिपल इज नॉट imposing any liability on B. We are only concerned with the liability of A. तो A liable होगा डेफिनेटली, ऑप्शन ए और बी काट लेते हैं. C is the only right answer. A is liable because projection amounts to escape. And how was it dangerous? Because it was a poisonous tree, so it became dangerous. Simple case. Something dangerous on my property escapes the boundary of my property, goes beyond my property, causes damage, I am liable. That's it. I cannot avoid my liability. Okay. Similarly, let's solve another question. Look at this. Now I told you if it is an industry, that means it becomes a commercial setup, and in commercial setup we know that absolute liability is imposed. But even then, what has happened is there was a leakage from the tank, and because of that many workers in other industries, that means outside and inside, so यहाँ पे दोनों तरह का डैमेज हुआ है, outside plus inside दोनों तरह का डैमेज हुआ है. And that is why it becomes a case of no fault liability. So A liable to hoga for sure. That means B for Bangalore is the right answer. B for Bangalore is the right answer. Okay. Responsible for the fault. That's it. That's it. So understood both the concepts. Again, let me summarize. The similarity between strict and absolute liability is that there is a dangerous thing which has escaped and caused damage. The differentiating element between the two concepts is that in strict liability it is a non-commercial setup generally, whereas in absolute liability it is a commercial profit making setup. And in strict liability we saw a few differences, but in absolute liability there are no differences. Okay, so do study this concept from the Clat possible material, and you will find more examples to it. You will find more detailed explanations to it, which will definitely add value to your existing knowledge on these concepts. Okay, like and share this video, and do subscribe the channel if you haven't done it already, because on this Clat Possible YouTube channel, we keep coming up with the most relevant, critical, and important concepts that really matter for your examination. Thank you so much. See you all very soon.